Welcome to using a steady rest. A steady rest is used to support long, slender workpieces. The steady rest also permits machining operations, such as facing and boring, to be done on the ends of the work. The steady rest is made of cast iron or steel and is hinged so that parts can be loaded and unloaded. This video will show you how to set up a long piece of tubing so that we can bore the ends. Steady rests should never be used on rough surfaces. When you need to use forging, casting, or hot-rolled materials, you need to machine a concentric bearing surface in the part before using the steady rest. You should use a similar technique when using thick-walled tubing or other materials that tend to be out of round. To machine a bearing surface on thick-walled tubing, you need to set up a cathead. Begin by placing the tubing in a 4-jaw chuck. Indicate the chucked end of the tubing to part specifications. Place the cathead loosely on the outboard end of the tubing. Bring in the tailstock with a ball bearing center for support. Indicate the cathead end using the 4 set screws in the same manner as the 4 jaws in a 4-jaw chuck. Mount a cutting tool in the tool holder. In our example, the bearing surfaces are cut 2 inches in from both ends. Remove no more in diameter than necessary to clean up the piece. The length of the bearing surface should be wide enough to accommodate the bearings in the steady rest. Cut the outboard bearing and the chuck-in bearing surfaces. Do not remove the cathead. Finally, slide the tailstock out of the way and run the carriage to the right. Next, let's see how we mount the steady rest. Begin by cleaning the ways in preparation for mounting the steady rest. Clean the base. If you need to, back the jaws out to accommodate the diameter of the tubing. Open the steady rest. Mount it on the outboard end of the tubing at the bearing surface. Tighten the base clamp. Bring the tailstock, with the ball bearing center, in contact with the cathead for alignment. This keeps the part aligned until the steady rest is in place. Bring the 2 lower jaws into slight contact with the tubing. Close the steady rest and lock the top in place. Bring the top jaw down into contact with the bearing surface. Do not over-tighten the top jaw. Slide the tailstock back. Loosen 2 set screws on the cathead. Keep track of which 2 screws were loosened. Remove the cathead. Set the RPM for the lathe at a slow speed. Turn the spindle on forward and listen. A slight hum from the steady rest bearings is normal. Anything more than a slight hum should be reported to your instructor or supervisor. Now you can begin machining. Next, we'll learn how to flip the part. When you're finished machining the first end, back the steady rest jaws up and open it. Loosen up 2 jaws of the 4-jaw chuck. Keep track of which 2 jaws you loosened. Flip the part. Tighten the same 2 jaws you just loosened. Mount an indicator and indicate the chuck end at the bearing surface. Loosely place the cathead on the outboard end of the tubing. Lightly tighten the same 2 set screws that were loosened earlier. Bring the tailstock, with the ball bearing center, in for support. We're using the cathead and the tailstock to keep the tubing aligned with the steady rest. If it's out of alignment, the tubing walks itself out of the chuck. Indicate the cathead end at the bearing surface. Bring the 2 lower jaws into slight contact with the tubing and close the steady rest. Lock the top of the steady rest in place. Bring the top jaw down into contact with the bearing surface. Do not over-tighten the top jaw. Slide the tailstock back and remove the cathead. Set the RPM for the lathe at a slow speed. Turn the spindle on forward and listen. A slight hum from the steady rest bearings is normal. Anything more than a slight hum should be reported to your instructor or supervisor. Now you can begin machining the second end of the part. Many parts need to be in steady rest before being turned in a lathe. Many larger CNC lathes use a steady rest, and you can apply the same principles you've just learned to these machines. Congratulations, you've completed using a steady rest.